Imagine going to bed tonight with a calm mind, free from the endless noise of stress, fear, and overthinking. Imagine waking up tomorrow not only rested, but stronger, clearer, and more focused than you've ever felt before. Now ask yourself, why hasn't that happened yet? Why do you carry the same weight to bed every night, only to wake up just as tired, just as lost, just as reactive? What are you really doing with those hours between dusk and dawn, numbing the pain with distractions, or silently hoping that tomorrow fixes what you refuse to face today? The truth is uncomfortable. Most people don't rest, they escape. And what you refuse to confront in the quiet of night will tear you apart in the chaos of morning. Sleep is not an escape for the stoic. It is discipline. It is reflection. It is mental warfare done in silence. Because if your nights are filled with noise, your days will collapse in weakness. But if your nights are shaped with intention, your days will rise with power. What you're about to discover isn't just a meditation, it's a confrontation with yourself, a method to rewire your subconscious, sharpen your character, and finally stop living on autopilot. A view that refuses to live another day unconsciously. Consider it a step toward reclaiming your life, one quiet night at a time. There's a kind of silence that doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure. You feel it when the room finally goes quiet, when the notifications stop, when no one's speaking, but your mind won't stop shouting. The weight doesn't come from one moment, it's everything all at once. The conversations you wish had gone differently, the glances you misread, the things you didn't say when you should have, the decisions that still linger in the back of your throat. And even when the day is done, it doesn't let you go. It follows you into bed like a shadow that refuses to leave. You close your eyes, hoping for rest, but it turns into a battleground. Your thoughts circling like vultures, memories flickering like static on an old screen. Most people think this is normal. They call it stress, anxiety, overthinking. But it's more than that. It's the mental clutter of a life lived without pause, without reflection, without clearing space between days. When you carry everything from today into tomorrow, you're not resting, you're dragging. And the more you drag, the heavier it becomes. The body lies down, but the mind stays upright, pacing, sorting, reacting. That's why so many people wake up exhausted, even after 8 hours of sleep, because they never really slept. They never emptied the mind. They just closed their eyes and hoped for relief. But Stoicism doesn't offer hope. It offers practice. Most people try to control the world while their own thoughts spiral unchecked. They spend the entire day running, doing, replying, reacting, and then expect the night to heal what they never made peace with. The truth is, you don't heal from the chaos unless you confront it. Not in a loud, aggressive way, but in the soft, disciplined way a Stoic faces himself. Honestly, silently, deliberately. What you take to bed with you determines the quality of your rest. Not just whether you sleep deeply, but whether that sleep restores you or drains you further. If your final thoughts are ones of shame, regret, or fear, your subconscious will spend the night replaying that narrative. The cycle continues. But if your final thoughts are grounded in clarity, if you take the time to name the weight, observe it without judgment, and let it go, then sleep becomes what it was meant to be, a reset, not a rerun. This doesn't require hours. It doesn't require some mystical ritual. It just requires intention. Before you sleep, you examine. You don't scroll. You don't numb. You sit quietly and take stock. Not to punish yourself, but to release yourself. Because what isn't examined stays unresolved. And what's unresolved doesn't disappear. It festers. The weight you carry is often not even yours. It's the expectations others placed on you. The roles you think you have to perform. The guilt you inherited. the future you're expected to build. All of it piles up silently until it crushes your peace. The mind becomes a container filled with noise that doesn't belong to you. That's why the night must be reclaimed. It's the only part of the day no one else touches. There are no meetings, no emails, no obligations, just you and whatever you haven't faced. And if you don't face it, it will face you. In dreams, in tension, in that subtle resistance to waking up. Most people think tiredness is physical. Often it's emotional residue. You didn't argue with anyone today, but you rehearsed arguments in your mind. You weren't in danger, but you imagined 10 ways things could go wrong. The nervous system doesn't know the difference. It just responds, and it keeps responding, even as you lie in bed. So the question isn't, how do I sleep better? It's, what am I bringing to sleep that I should have put down hours ago? The Stoic practice isn't about denial, it's about awareness. You don't pretend the weight isn't there. You acknowledge it, you study it, and then you decide what's useful and what's not. That's the mental audit. Not obsessively analyzing your flaws, but checking in with truth. Just enough to know what needs to be carried forward and what needs to be left behind. You can't solve everything in one night, but you can stop carrying things that don't serve you. You can let go of the day in small, disciplined acts, not dramatic ones, just a sentence, a breath, a choice to release. The mind doesn't rest just because the lights go out. It rests when you give it closure. It rests when you say, I've seen enough today, I've learned from it, and now I release it. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, because there will be more tomorrow, more noise, more decisions, more emotions, and you won't meet them with strength if you're still tangled in yesterday. So every night becomes a threshold. Cross it carrying less, and you wake up with more clarity. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The weight you carry to bed is part of that unconscious. It's not just what happened, it's what you believe about what happened. The story you keep telling yourself, that you're behind, that you're not enough, that you should have done more. These stories become the background music of your life. Low, constant, exhausting. But when you bring them into awareness, when you pause, notice, and question them, they begin to lose their grip. You don't need a perfect day to sleep well. You need an honest one. You need to look at what happened, see it clearly, and decide not to let it define you. That's what Stoicism teaches. That you're not your circumstances, you're your response. And the response doesn't end when the day does. It continues into how you rest, how you reset, and how you rise again. So tonight, when you lie down, don't numb out, don't run. Sit with the weight, name it, and then gently begin to let it go. You're not discarding the day, you're distilling it, keeping what teaches, releasing what drains. And when the mind is clear, the body follows. Sleep becomes a friend, not a fight. You wake up not just alive, but aligned. And when you live aligned, even the hardest days lose their power to break you, because you've learned the quiet strength of putting the weight down before you close your eyes. The body may lie down, motionless and quiet, but the mind never truly sleeps. Beneath the stillness, thoughts are weaving themselves into patterns, unfinished conversations echo, and emotions from the day begin to arrange themselves like books on shelves that never quite stay in order. Most people assume the mind simply shuts off when the body does, but the reality is far more subtle and far more powerful. The Stoics understood this long before neuroscience could explain it. They saw the night not as a place of unconscious drifting, but as a sacred opportunity to give the mind its instructions, to speak directly to the part of us that keeps working while we're no longer watching. Because the thoughts you fall asleep with don't just disappear, they sink deeper. They become the script your subconscious memorizes and replays the next day. That's why so many people wake up already anxious. It's not that something new is wrong, it's that yesterday's unresolved noise kept spinning all night. You didn't sleep so much as stew. You closed your eyes hoping for peace, but what you carried into sleep became the foundation of how you rise. This is what the Stoics trained for, not just battle or hardship, but clarity. They knew that the final hour of your day is more important than the first, because it's the hour where you choose whether to leave your mind untended or to shape it with awareness and precision. That last thought before sleep, that's the seed, and your subconscious is the soil. You don't need a perfect day for that seed to take root. You just need a deliberate one. So many people go to sleep with noise blaring in their heads, screens glowing, notifications buzzing, stories unfolding on TV or scrolling past their fingertips. None of it feels threatening in the moment, but the mind doesn't forget. It absorbs, it stores, and the consequence isn't just restless sleep, it's misdirected energy. Your brain works with what you give it. If you give it chaos, it learns to normalize chaos. If you give it quiet reflection, it learns to seek wisdom even in stillness. The mind is trainable, but it doesn't train itself. It takes instruction, clear, firm, compassionate instruction. That's why the Stoics practiced nightly reflection. It wasn't romantic or ceremonial, it was practical. What did I do well today? Where did I fail to show up as the person I claim to be? What triggered me? What moved me? What did I learn? These aren't questions meant to bring shame. They're meant to sharpen the blade. Marcus Aurelius didn't reflect to feel good about himself. He reflected to refine himself. He treated each day as a training session, not a performance, and the review was just as important as the action, because that's where growth begins, in the quiet space where you process rather than perform. Even in sleep, your nervous system remains partially alert. Your dreams are often shaped by emotional residue, the unresolved tension, the unsaid words, the unfinished choices. If the last thing you do before bed is distract yourself, you're denying your mind the clarity it needs to clean itself. But if you close the day with a moment of direction, even a single thought like, "Tomorrow I will meet discomfort with patience," you're planting a blueprint for the mind to follow. It doesn't need hours, just honesty, just intention. Seneca understood this deeply. He once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," and the mind, left on its own, becomes a factory for imagined suffering. It amplifies the what-ifs. It spins the smallest missteps into stories of doom. But when you give it structure, when you close the day with reason instead of regret, you stop that spiral before it begins. You begin to train your imagination to work with you, not against you. The problem is, we've normalized chaos. We've accepted that the mind runs wild at night. We treat it like a storm we have no control over. But that's not true. You do have a say. You just have to stop running from the stillness long enough to hear what your mind is trying to show you. The same way you don't let a fire burn unattended, you don't let the mind roam without awareness. You guide it, not with force, but with presence. You tell it where to look, you remind it what matters, and then you let go. The most dangerous part of letting your mind run freely at night isn't the immediate anxiety, it's the slow, invisible shaping of who you become. Every unexamined thought becomes easier to think again. Every replayed fear becomes more familiar. Over time, the pathways deepen. You start becoming someone who expects tension, who assumes the worst, who forgets how to meet life with calm. That change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts overnight. In the moments when your mind is most suggestible, most open. So what are you feeding it? Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists. If you resist examining your thoughts, they won't disappear. They'll fester in the background, leaking into your emotions, your relationships, your decisions. But if you sit with them, even for 5 minutes, even without solving anything, just naming them, witnessing them, you create space. And space is everything. Space allows you to respond instead of react. It allows you to place your hand on the steering wheel of your mind, even if just for a moment. The Stoic approach isn't cold or emotionless. It's disciplined compassion. It's asking the question, what do I need to confront before I close my eyes? And then listening. Sometimes the answer is a feeling you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's a pattern you didn't notice during the rush of the day. Sometimes it's something good, something you need to anchor more deeply. Because the mind doesn't just replay what hurt, it also strengthens what healed. But only if you give it your attention. Only if you say, this is worth remembering. Imagine giving your mind a job before sleep, not a command, a quiet task. Review the day, find what matters, let go of what doesn't. That alone begins to change your relationship with night. It turns sleep from escape into training, from survival into intention. You stop dragging yesterday into tomorrow. You stop waking up with a weight you didn't choose. Instead, you rise a little clearer, a little more grounded. And over time, that clarity compounds. The power of this practice isn't in how long it takes. It's in how often you repeat it. The repetition forms a rhythm, a signal to your brain that the day is complete, that it doesn't need to carry every burden forward, that it can soften, settle, breathe. You're not teaching your mind to be silent. You're teaching it to be wise, to know what to hold and what to release. When your head touches the pillow, the training doesn't end. It begins. What you think in those final moments shapes the architecture of your rest, and that rest shapes the architecture of your next day. A Stoic doesn't chase control, they create alignment. They sleep with purpose, so they can rise with strength. So tonight, when everything quiets down, don't waste the moment. Don't fill it with noise you won't remember. Fill it with meaning. Sit for a moment in stillness. Let your mind bring forward whatever needs to be seen. Don't argue, don't analyze, just listen. Then speak to it, not with fear, but with clarity. Give it a single message, a direction, and then sleep, knowing you've already begun the work. Not through struggle, but through awareness. Because even while you rest, your mind keeps moving. The only question is, will it move with intention or without you? At the end of the day, the world quiets down, but your mind doesn't. You turn off the lights, but the thoughts remain lit. Not loud, maybe, just persistent, lingering. The comments you brushed off but still think about. The hesitation that cost you a chance. The small courage you showed but no one noticed. This is the space where the evening audit begins. Not as a punishment, not as a chore, but as a clearing. You don't need an hour. You don't need perfection. You need presence. Just a few honest moments with yourself before the noise of the day becomes the background hum of your dreams. Marcus Aurelius used to ask himself, did I live according to my values? And in that question, there's no accusation, only alignment. You're not chasing flawlessness, you're checking the compass. That's all. Did I act like the person I say I want to be? Did I speak with truth, even when silence was safer? Did I let fear drive me, or did I pause long enough to choose? These aren't questions to make you feel guilty. They're questions that bring you back to yourself. Without them, the day slips by without meaning. And then another, and another, until you're living by momentum instead of principle. The audit isn't about fixing everything. It's about noticing. Because what you don't notice, you can't change. And what you don't acknowledge will keep shaping your behavior quietly, day after day. Most people wait for disaster to reflect. The Stoic reflects before the storm hits, not to avoid it, but to be ready, to be sturdy. And the evening is the perfect time, because the world has done its talking. Now it's your turn to listen, to sit in the echoes of your actions and see what they say about the life you're building. You might find that the victories are quiet. You said no when you usually would have said yes just to please someone. You stepped away from an argument instead of proving your point. You made space for someone else's perspective, even if it challenged yours. These things don't earn applause, but they deserve recognition, because those are the moments your character is shaped, not in grand gestures, but in private choices. The audit lets you notice them, and that noticing strengthens them. You'll also find where you fell short. Maybe you lied. Maybe you avoided a hard truth. Maybe you snapped, even though the person didn't deserve it. That's part of the process too. You don't fix it by beating yourself up. You fix it by being honest enough to say, this isn't who I want to be, and compassionate enough to say, but I'm still allowed to try again tomorrow. This is what it means to train your mind with Stoic discipline. Discipline that doesn't shame but sharpens. When you skip the audit, you carry yesterday's weight into tomorrow. The frustration lingers. The mistakes blur into habits. And you don't even know why you feel heavy in the morning. You think it's stress or lack of sleep. But often it's just unresolved behavior. You didn't clear the fog. And so you wake up still walking through it. Reflection is the broom, the breath, the release. It's what makes tomorrow possible instead of just a repeat of today. When you don't look at what you've done, what you've chosen, what you've avoided, you don't escape it. You just stop seeing it, and then it governs you. But when you do look, something shifts. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if the mirror isn't flattering, you've taken control. You've opened a space between who you were and who you're becoming. This isn't a new ritual. It's an old one, ancient even. The Stoics practiced it daily, not because they were obsessed with performance, but because they were devoted to growth. They knew that a person who never stops to evaluate their choices is doomed to keep making the same ones. But a person who reviews their day becomes an author of their life, not just a character in it. This is what the audit gives you: authorship, ownership, a way to step back and say, this is where I stand, and this is where I need to go. You don't need to write it all down, though that helps. You don't need a journal with perfect handwriting or a quiet mountain cabin. All you need is a pause, a few questions, a willingness to be seen by yourself. The world won't see this part. No one will praise you for it, but you'll feel it. The shift, the weight dropping, the focus sharpening, the alignment returning. You'll start to sleep not as an escape, but as a preparation. The audit softens your relationship with regret. It teaches you that imperfection is not failure, it's feedback. It trains you to respond to your mistakes with clarity, not with collapse. You begin to say things like, next time I'll speak slower, or next time I'll walk away sooner. And those small intentions begin to accumulate. They shape your self-trust. They build a quiet confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. Because you know you're watching yourself. You know you're learning. There's something beautiful about ending your day with honesty. It grounds you. It quiets the noise. It gives you closure without needing everything to be perfect. You stop needing to explain yourself to others because you've already done it privately, with sincerity. You stop needing to defend your decisions because you've already examined them. You begin to rest, not in ignorance, but in understanding. The evening audit isn't a ritual for the weak. It's a ritual for those brave enough to face their own reflection without flinching. For those who know that growth doesn't come from ignoring the parts of yourself you dislike, but from including them, learning from them, and gradually choosing better. This is how you change. Not through force, not through pretending, but through small, honest meetings with yourself, day after day. So tonight, when the noise fades and the world stops asking for your attention, turn inward. Ask the questions that matter. Listen to the answers, even if they sting. And when you lay your head down, do it knowing you've already taken the first step into tomorrow, with your eyes open, your mind steady, and your spirit aligned with the person you're becoming. That's not just rest, that's renewal, and it begins with a simple choice: to look. The hardest part about change isn't knowing what to do, it's being honest about what went wrong. Most people carry their mistakes like a secret shame, hiding them under distractions or pretending they never happened. But avoidance has a cost. It doesn't protect you. It blinds you, and that blindness keeps the pattern alive. You find yourself in the same situation with the same regret, telling yourself, next time will be different, but never really knowing why it wasn't different the last time. The Stoic understands this. They don't fear the flaw. They look it in the eye and ask what it's trying to teach. Awareness isn't about self-punishment. It's about self-respect. You have to care enough about your future to face the truth of your past, not in a way that rips you apart, but in a way that realigns you, that grounds you. And that begins with asking a better question, not what's wrong with me, but what happened there and how can I handle it differently next time? That shift in tone makes all the difference. It moves you from guilt to growth, from shame to strategy. Seneca once wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. We are crushed not by our failures, but by the illusion that we were supposed to avoid them completely. The truth is, you'll mess up. You'll say things you didn't mean. You'll act from fear instead of wisdom. You'll fall short of your own standards. And that's not a reason to feel worthless. It's a reason to refine your awareness. The goal isn't perfection, it's precision, to locate the turning point, the hesitation, the moment you chose silence when you should have spoken, or acted quickly when you needed to pause. There's power in being able to say, that's where it slipped. You're not blaming the world. You're not collapsing into self-pity. You're just tracing the thread back to its source. That level of clarity is rare, because it takes courage to name your part in the pain. But the moment you do, the cycle begins to weaken. You stop being at the mercy of your own habits. You start becoming deliberate, directional, focused. Shame, on the other hand, pulls you in the opposite direction. It makes you hide. It makes you feel like the mistake is your identity, not just your action. And once you start thinking that way, it's hard to grow. Because growth requires movement, and shame freezes you in place. That's why Stoicism teaches awareness without judgment. You examine the event not as a prosecutor, but as a philosopher. You ask what it means, what it reveals, and how you can meet that moment differently if it returns. You'll find that the same scenarios tend to repeat until you learn the lesson. The face might change, the job might change, but the dynamic stays the same until you respond differently. And the only way to respond differently is to see clearly, to study the pattern without emotional fog. This is where reflection becomes transformation. You're not dwelling, you're designing. You're saying, I see what I did, and I see what I can do. Clarity is painful at first, because it dissolves excuses. It removes the comfort of blaming others. But what's left behind is strength, quiet, steady strength. The kind that says, I don't have to be flawless. I just have to be aware. And that awareness becomes the foundation of your decisions. You begin to catch yourself in real time. You notice the rising anger before it spills out. You sense the pull toward distraction before it takes over. You pause. You choose. That kind of self-control isn't forced, it's built. Through moments of observation, through reviewing your actions without twisting them into shame. You learn to separate the behavior from your identity. You're not a failure. You're a human refining their process. That distinction matters. It creates space for growth, for self-respect, for forward movement without carrying a backpack full of guilt. You might wonder why it's so hard to forgive yourself. And the answer is usually because you haven't understood yourself. Forgiveness follows understanding, and understanding follows attention. The more clearly you see your behavior, the less you need to defend it. The less you need to pretend it didn't happen. You accept it. And that acceptance isn't weakness, it's awareness, the very fuel of transformation. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That's the bridge between reflection and power. You're not frozen by what you did. You're awakened by what it showed you. You begin to realize that the discomfort of awareness is temporary, but the clarity it brings can reshape your entire life. You start to crave that clarity, not because it feels good, but because it gives you freedom. Freedom from repetition, from confusion, from self-sabotage disguised as self-protection. There's something deeply noble in being able to name your faults with honesty, but not hatred. That's the Stoic posture, the willingness to say, yes, I failed here, but I will not build my identity around that failure. I will build it around the discipline to respond better. That shift creates a momentum of self-respect, not arrogance, not perfectionism, but respect. Because you are showing up, you are facing yourself, you are learning, and when you can do that, your mistakes become your teachers. Your regret becomes your compass. Your flaws stop being flaws and become functions of learning. You no longer obsess over being perfect. You commit to being present, to noticing the moment when the mistake is forming. And that moment becomes the fulcrum of your strength, the quiet, internal pivot where your future is decided. This isn't a mindset for those who want easy answers. It's a mindset for those who want real change, who are tired of the loop, who want to wake up and see the day differently because they faced the night honestly, who want to close their eyes not in denial, but in peace, because they know they've looked at themselves and made a quiet promise, not to be someone else, but to be someone better. The next time you catch yourself rehearsing your mistakes like a punishment, stop. Ask instead, what is this moment trying to show me? And what can I do, not to erase it, but to evolve because of it? That's the foundation of transformation. That's the core of Stoic sleep. Not escaping your day, but digesting it. Not shaming your mind into silence, but guiding it toward clarity. And in that clarity, you'll rest easier, not because life got easier, but because you became wiser, more grounded, less defined by your wounds, and more defined by how you've healed. That's awareness without shame. That's the work that changes everything. There's something subtle about strength that most people miss. They look for it in grand displays, in loud achievements, in obvious wins, in the days where everything lines up and feels effortless. But that's not where it lives. Real strength is quieter. It shows up when you hold your tongue in the middle of a storm, when you get out of bed even when your chest is heavy, when you respond calmly instead of reacting violently. These aren't dramatic moments. They're invisible to almost everyone, but not to you, and not to the subconscious mind that's always listening, always learning, always recording. Each time you act from your better self, even when no one sees it, you are laying down another brick in the foundation of your inner strength. It's easy to overlook these moments, to treat them as insignificant. You didn't yell, but you wanted to. You didn't quit, but you thought about it. You pushed through the task, even though your motivation was nowhere to be found. These seem like minor things, but they're not. They're training. Every act of restraint, every small decision to keep going, sends a message to your identity. This is who I am. You're not just surviving your day, you're shaping yourself with it. That's the part most people ignore. They're so focused on what went wrong that they forget to see what went right. There's power in noticing your small victories, not because you're trying to inflate your ego, but because you're trying to reinforce your discipline. The mind works through repetition. It strengthens what it's reminded of. If all you do at the end of the day is replay the mistakes, then the mind starts to believe that's all you are. But when you take a moment to say, "There, I stayed patient. There, I acted with clarity," you're not just congratulating yourself. You're giving your subconscious a blueprint. You're telling it, "This is what strength looks like. Let's do it again." Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't talking about dramatic power. He meant the subtle command over your own reactions, the decision to slow down when you feel like speeding up, to pause when you want to explode, to try again when it would be easier to shut down. These aren't loud moves, they don't get applause, but they build a kind of internal gravity, a pull toward your better nature. You don't need a perfect day to prove your growth. You just need one moment of control, one moment of courage, one moment where you didn't give in to the version of you that wants to stay stuck. That one moment, when acknowledged, becomes the seed of the next. And soon, what started as a single act becomes a pattern, a rhythm, a way of being. It starts to feel natural, even when it's difficult, because your mind has practiced it, your body has moved through it, your spirit has been shaped by it. Most people will never see the strength it took for you to hold yourself together when everything inside was falling apart. They'll never know what it meant for you to show up, to keep your word, to be kind when you were hurting. But that's okay. It's not for them, it's for you. You're the one building something real, something that doesn't rely on circumstances or recognition. You're building character. And character is what remains when the noise fades, when the pressure hits, when the world isn't watching. These moments don't have to be dramatic. Sometimes strength is as simple as choosing a glass of water over the 5th scroll through your phone. Sometimes it's stepping outside for a breath instead of spiraling into the argument. It's setting your alarm for the next morning, even when the day just drained you. These are small moves, but they're significant, because they're yours. They're chosen. And what is chosen repeatedly becomes who you are. It's easy to chase the idea of transformation through big, sweeping changes, but most people who chase that burn out, because they ignore the value of the small. They forget that a wall is not made of one giant slab. It's made of bricks, laid one at a time, pressed together with patience, and each brick matters. Miss enough of them, and the wall crumbles. But place them with intention, and over time it holds strong, even against the weight of life. Strength isn't just what you feel when you're confident. It's what you build when you feel weak. It's what you choose when you're uncertain. And in the quiet of your evening, when your mind begins to reflect, it's those tiny choices that speak the loudest. "I kept going," they whisper. "I didn't break." And that whisper is louder than any praise the outside world could ever give you. This is why the Stoics practiced reflection, not to punish themselves, but to notice, to catch the thread of progress, to reinforce what's working so that it grows stronger. Without that awareness, the good moments pass by unnoticed, and the mind becomes conditioned to see only flaws. But with awareness, the mind becomes an ally. It starts looking for strength rather than shame. It begins to associate resilience with identity. Carl Jung once wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate." If you don't consciously mark your strength, it fades into the background. And then you forget how far you've come. You forget what you've survived. You forget that even when everything felt heavy, you moved one step forward. And that forgetting robs you of momentum. But remembering creates resilience. It gives your progress a spine. You don't need to broadcast your small victories. Just respect them. Just notice them. Let them inform the story you tell yourself about who you are. Not a victim, not a mess, not someone who's falling apart, but someone who keeps showing up, someone who keeps trying, someone who keeps building, brick by brick, the inner strength no one can take away. Every evening when you pause to review your day, find that one thing, that one moment of control, and honor it. Let it be the thread you follow tomorrow, because these aren't just moments, they're momentum, and with enough of them, you become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because you've gotten stronger where it matters most, quietly, internally, consistently. That's the kind of strength that transforms your nights, that resets your nervous system, that allows you to fall asleep not with regret, but with a quiet pride. The kind that says, I did something hard today, and I chose well. You don't need to win the world, just win yourself. Moment by moment. That's where it all begins. There's a moment each night when everything starts to settle. The world outside begins to quiet. The noise, the tasks, the decisions, they start to slow down. And in that space, in that strange stillness between your last thought and your first dream, the truth begins to rise. Not the truth you tell others. The truth that only shows itself when there's nowhere left to run. That's why so many people keep running. Because silence is unsettling. It's confronting. It's where all the feelings you buried during the day come crawling back. But what if that discomfort isn't your enemy? What if it's your teacher? We've been trained to reach for noise, to fill every empty space with entertainment, distraction, stimulation. A song in the background, a podcast while brushing your teeth, one last scroll through the feed before your eyes finally close. But none of this prepares you for sleep. It delays it. It clutters it. It turns your rest into an escape rather than a recovery. What the Stoics knew, what many have forgotten, is that stillness isn't something to avoid, it's something to practice. There's something sacred about sitting in silence at the end of the day. No screens, no music, just you and the quiet. At first it can feel unbearable. Your mind races. Thoughts you didn't invite start marching through. Regrets, anxieties, embarrassments. All the things you tried to push away suddenly sit beside you in the room. This is the moment where most people reach for something, anything, to numb it. But if you can resist that urge, something powerful happens. The noise begins to burn off, and beneath it, you find clarity. The Stoic doesn't fear silence because they understand it's not emptiness. It's exposure. It's where you meet yourself without distractions, and in that meeting, you begin to see clearly what you avoided, what you denied, what you truly want. In stillness, the mask slips. The ego quiets. The core starts to surface. This is why silence is preparation. Because when the lights go off and your mind is left alone, what you've rehearsed all day is what will echo through the night. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That line takes on a new weight in silence, because silence demands inwardness. It won't let you hide behind noise or movement. It forces you to listen to the thoughts you suppressed, the instincts you ignored, the values you betrayed. But it also helps you remember. You remember what actually matters, what brings peace, what you want to become. You begin to strip away the false layers you wore to survive the day. And when you do, something unexpected happens. The silence stops feeling threatening. It starts feeling safe. It becomes the place where your real voice lives, not the reactive one, not the angry one, not the performative one. The honest voice, the one that whispers things like, "Let it go," or "You're doing better than you think," or maybe, "You need to have that conversation." That voice gets drowned out when you're always filling your head with more, but in silence, it finally gets space to speak. There's a sharpening that happens in stillness. Like a blade drawn gently across a stone, your awareness starts to refine. You notice patterns. You catch impulses before they grow into actions. You see the gap between your automatic reaction and your chosen response. And in that gap, there is power. That's the preparation part. You're not just ending the day, you're preparing the mind for how it will meet tomorrow, whether it will be reactive or intentional, whether it will follow emotion or lead with wisdom. Most people don't sleep, they crash. They exhaust themselves with information and screens and endless stimulation until the mind just shuts down. But that's not rest, that's sedation. True rest comes from deliberate unwinding, from returning to the self before the day ends, from choosing to meet your thoughts instead of running from them. And when you do that, your sleep becomes something deeper. It becomes a time when the mind, already aligned, carries your intentions into your subconscious. You don't just sleep better, you become better. You don't have to sit for hours. Just a few minutes of real stillness before bed can change everything. Light dimmed, screens off, no agenda, just breathing, just being. And if it's hard at first, that's okay. That means you're doing it right. Growth doesn't always feel good, but it always leaves something behind, something quieter, something stronger, something clearer. The silence you once feared begins to turn into a mirror, not the kind that reflects your face, but your mind. It shows you where you've been honest and where you've pretended, where you've grown and where you've stalled. And unlike external judgment, it's not cruel. It doesn't punish. It reveals, it guides, it prepares. And each time you return to it, that mirror becomes a little less foggy, a little more illuminating. You start to see yourself not through the lens of comparison or expectation, but through presence. And in that presence you begin to change. You start to carry less, because you've begun to process more. The day doesn't stick to you the way it used to. Conversations don't replay with the same sting. Mistakes don't define you because you've started tending to them, quietly, privately, but consistently. You've turned silence into a tool, into a ritual, into a place you visit every night to clear the mind, settle the spirit, and remind yourself who you are. That's what stoic sleep really means. Not just unconscious rest, but deliberate preparation. It means entering the night not as an escape, but as a continuation of your discipline. It means refusing to be at the mercy of a restless mind and choosing instead to meet it with stillness, with courage, with presence. And over time, this practice changes your days too, because the more comfortable you become with silence, the less control the world has over you. You don't need to react to every noise. You don't need to fill every gap. You start to listen more, speak less, respond with intention, think before moving. You become someone who carries stillness within them, even in chaos. So the silence that once felt like a threat becomes your sanctuary, a place you go to remember who you are, a place you go to align yourself with what matters. And every night, as you return to that place, your mind becomes clearer, your decisions more deliberate, your rest more restorative. You become, little by little, the person who is no longer afraid to face their own thoughts. Because now you understand, they're not enemies, they're guides, and they've been waiting to speak all along. You don't simply drift into tomorrow. Whether you realize it or not, you rehearse it. In the quiet hours of the night, when the day has finally loosened its grip, your mind doesn't just wind down, it rewinds, reviews, and replays. It watches you like a silent observer, pulling back the curtain on moments you rushed through, decisions you didn't fully consider, words you wish you had said differently, or not at all. And in that mental theater, a choice quietly emerges. You can either leave the past untouched, or you can plant something different for the morning. That's where reflection becomes more than memory. It becomes a form of rehearsal, not for perfection, but for precision. You begin with acknowledgement. You don't look away from the fact that you lost your temper. You don't sugarcoat the way you dismissed someone's feelings. You don't rationalize the way you chose avoidance over courage. You name it, clearly and honestly, not to drown yourself in guilt, but to begin reshaping the way you show up tomorrow. This is the beginning of transformation, the moment where awareness turns into responsibility. The Stoics never believed reflection should end at observation. Marcus Aurelius wrote not just to record what had happened, but to sharpen how he would respond next time. He saw the page not as a place to vent, but as a place to train. Each entry was a quiet commitment to do better, to become more composed, more courageous, more focused. You do the same when you take a moment before bed and shift your narrative from passive regret to active intention. You say, "I hesitated when I should have stepped forward. Tomorrow, I won't." And with that simple phrase, you begin to rehearse a new version of yourself. The human brain doesn't differentiate much between mental rehearsal and lived experience. That's why visualization works. That's why athletes train in the mind before they perform in the arena. Your subconscious listens closely to what you tell it at night. If you end your day replaying shame, resentment, or helplessness, you carry that energy into the next one. But if you choose to end your day with even the smallest seed of, "Next time, I'll meet it differently," you begin to carve a new path. It's not magic, it's direction. It's the gentle shaping of character through the repetition of intention. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. But what you rehearse in thought often becomes what you do." That's why the Stoic mind doesn't just reflect, it scripts. It lays out how it wants to respond to challenge, how it wants to speak in discomfort, how it wants to act when tested. Because the future is never truly random. It reflects the patterns you've been practicing, whether consciously or not. Every small correction you mentally note, "Tomorrow I will listen longer. I'll speak less when I'm angry. I won't rush to defend my ego," is like laying down a stone. One stone doesn't build a path, but thousands do. Over time, these nightly rehearsals become the framework of how you move through the world. You don't just wake up and hope to be better. You wake up having already met the version of yourself you're aiming to become. And each day that version becomes more familiar. You may not get it right the next morning. That's fine. The point isn't to be flawless, it's to be more conscious. The point is that when the same challenge returns, and it will, you don't meet it blind. You've already walked through it in your mind. You've softened the reactive edge. You've rehearsed the pause. You've reminded yourself of the values you want to protect. And in that tiny space between impulse and action, something new has the chance to breathe. The problem isn't that we make mistakes, it's that we repeat them without reflection. When you end your day mindlessly, those missteps become habits. But when you end your day intentionally, you begin to chisel away at what no longer serves you. You turn reflection into refinement. You stop letting the past be just a weight, and instead use it as a guide, not to punish yourself, but to lead yourself. It's like shaping clay. If you walk away from the wheel and never return, it hardens as it is, misshapen, lopsided, rough. But if you return each evening with wet hands and gentle focus, you can smooth the edges, realign the form, and over time create something that resembles what you actually intended to make. You are not stuck with today's version of yourself. You are not doomed to repeat the same patterns just because they're familiar. You have access to the wheel, and every night you get to sit at it. This is where the deeper strength of Stoicism lives, not just in philosophy, but in practice. It's not just about knowing what's right. It's about rehearsing it, about quietly preparing for the moments that test your patience, your integrity, your humility. It's the commitment to say, I may not have chosen well today, but I'll be ready tomorrow. And that one sentence, spoken without shame but with clarity, begins to shift the course of your entire life. You don't need to write it down, though that helps. You don't need to meditate for hours, though that might deepen the insight. All you need is a few quiet moments of presence, a soft review of the day, a calm decision about what to bring into the next one. No dramatics, no perfectionism, just you, observing the lines of your life and slowly deciding which ones to draw differently. That's the rehearsal. That's how the future is shaped. Not by accident, but by intention. Not by control, but by clarity. You sleep not as an escape, but as a quiet workshop, where the mind, gently and without pressure, begins to shape the character of tomorrow. And when you wake, you rise not just as who you were, but as who you've been quietly preparing to become. Every night, whether you're aware of it or not, your brain is still building. The lights may be off, your body still, and the room silent, but inside your mind, construction is underway. Networks are rewiring, memories are being sorted, and emotional residue from the day is being integrated. What's often missed is that the input you feed this system right before sleep becomes the blueprint for what's built. You don't just fall asleep, you hand over instructions. The brain doesn't decide whether to absorb what you gave it. It simply obeys. That's not opinion. That's biology. And it's also ancient wisdom. Neuroscience now confirms what philosophers thousands of years ago already practiced in silence. The brain consolidates memory, reinforces learned behaviors, and strengthens emotional patterns during sleep. It's not a passive state. It's a lab, one where thoughts, feelings, and unfinished conflicts are carried into the night like ingredients into a fire. That's why the moments before you sleep are not just moments. They're entry points. They decide whether you wake up clearer or more chaotic, stronger or stuck. You don't just rest, you rehearse. You don't just dream, you deepen. This is where the Stoics were far ahead of their time. They didn't wait for the morning to begin their discipline. They understood that what you do before you sleep matters just as much, if not more, than what you do after you wake. Seneca, in particular, would reflect each evening on his choices, reviewing his emotions and actions not to punish himself, but to program clarity. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day." That was his ritual, and whether he knew it or not, he was handing his mind clean material to organize instead of chaos to magnify. But today, many of us do the opposite. We go to bed scrolling, consuming whatever drama, envy, anger, or noise the world throws at us. We fall asleep comparing, complaining, replaying arguments that didn't end well. And then we wonder why we wake up irritated, distracted, and anxious. It's not a mystery. You planted rage and restlessness in the soil of your subconscious, and now you're living among the weeds that grew overnight. Your mind did its job. You just didn't give it the right assignment. So the real question is not whether you're programming your mind. The question is, what are you programming it with? Are you reinforcing insecurity by replaying your failures? Are you strengthening resentment by revisiting someone's betrayal? Are you deepening confusion by ending your day in chaos? Or are you, even for 5 quiet minutes, feeding your mind with clarity, purpose, and direction?